Hello and welcome to another episode of Naturally Adventurous. I'm Charlie Hesse and I'm joined as usual by my friend Ken Behrens.
Hi, folks.
How you doing?
Doing well. Back home after the travels, catching up on all the things I neglected.
Good stuff.
16,000 photos sorting through from the last 2
Oh
months.
my god, that's gonna be something, eh? To go
Yep.
through all those. Wow. Anyway, before we get into today's topic, which is going to be getting back to our top lifetime mammals, we're going to do Ken's number 6 mammal next. But before that, just wanted to mention again about the online School of Birding, schoolofbirding.com. I mentioned last time that I just put out a tutorial on trip planning. So many thanks to those that have purchased that. That's thanks for the support. And I'm now busy preparing one on getting kids into birding, which should be a good one.
Yeah, can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm going to ask for help from my son, who's 9 years old and is already a keen birder, so he's sort of proof that it's possible to get kids into birding.
That's probably a good transition to the next topic about your weekend birding with Felix, right? I
Yeah.
saw your little video of yellow-breasted bunting, and he seemed really happy.
Oh, he was extremely happy. So, yeah, we live in Chiang Mai, and we've got a few birding sites nearby. We've got Doi Lang, it's about an hour away, and another one, Doi Lang. But if you go a little bit further north from Chiang Mai, maybe about 3 hours, you start to get up to some more northern mountains that have some different birds than down here. And they're really top birding sites, and we really, I'm trying to get my son as many lifers as possible, and that's my sort of mission in life at the moment, is to build my son's life list.
So you can't guide anybody
See,
else, but you can guide Felix. He's your substitute tour participant for the pandemic.
We were sort of up at 5:30 a.m. and driving up into the mountains looking for rare birds. So we had some fantastic birding. We went to a place called Doi Lang, which is very cool. It's inside a national park, which is called Doi Ka Hom Pok. Oh, Doi Pa Hom Pok.
Can't believe you messed that up.
Doi Lang. The name of the place, everybody calls it Doi Lang, but it's not actually Doi Lang. It's called Doi San Ju. There's sort of two mountains, but the one that everybody
so that's the
goes
actual
up is
mountain.
called Doi.
Didn't know that.
That's the one that you approach from the western side. It was interesting years ago when we started birding up in that area. You approached it from the eastern side, and there's actually, you sort of go up this steep hill, and there's a loop road that goes all the way back down and down the western side. But and you used to be able to drive that whole loop. It was fantastic. But it turned out that the central section of that road was actually in Myanmar. So they stopped people driving. They put 2 barriers, and that middle section is now sort of no man's land. So as a tourist, you're not allowed to go there. And yeah, so we went up the western side, which is Doi San Ju, and when I started guiding in Thailand, probably 10 years ago or so, we started visiting this site, and people started like taking mealworms up, and they would try and sort of get birds to come down and eat these mealworms. They kind of draw them into these little feeding stations. And it started off with just 1 or 2 spots, and then there was more and more, and then they would put sort of grain in the road and get pheasants coming in. And in the end, there was a whole bunch of these different things, and it became incredibly popular for bird photography. And we even had a birding with a camera, which is this sort of new tropical birding style tour, where it's not strictly a photography tour, it's not strictly a birding tour, it's somewhere on that sort of middle ground. Because a lot of bird watchers now, they carry cameras, so we wanted to have a sort of still fairly fast pace, but still opportunities to take pictures. And we had a birding with a camera event with the ABA. This was, I can't remember when it was. This last year, I think. Yeah, about this time last year.
2019, I think.
Was it 2019?
Yeah.
Oh, time goes so quickly, eh? Yeah, 2 years ago. Um, yeah, and we had a lot of different people, and we were sort of all driving around all these different spots, taking pictures of birds at these feeding stations. So yeah, I went up with Felix, and we were looking at all these cool birds coming in. So it was great.
Well, just to describe this phenomenon to people, it's to me, I found it one of the most bizarre forms of birding I've ever done, and definitely like
Yeah.
one of the weirdest kinds of guiding. So basically, the most essential thing you do as a guide is you stop in a pet shop that's down in the nearby town, and you have to know exactly the right pet shop. And
It's GPS. It's in the GPS.
yep, yeah, it's in the I think it's in the Tropical Birding Guide GPS now. And you stop there and you buy a whole bunch
They
of
said,
mealworms, and then you drive up this mountain at like 5 in the morning, and there are like what 15 little like feeding stations, which are just little
it's
clear
quite a few.
areas
Yeah.
with a nice picturesque like mossy log or twig that's
Yeah.
that's positioned there, and then you put the
Been
mealworms.
carefully placed.
Yep, yep. Some of those mossy logs and twigs, I swear they actually didn't come. They're not actually from Doi Lang. I think they're like from Intanon or like
I think
a much moister
people
place.
probably bring them
Yeah,
up.
I reckon.
Yeah.
And so you sort of you cache the mealworms around, but in a sort of hidden way, so that they're not marring your photos. And then the birds come in, and you get amazing views of birds that are just almost impossible to see. Like 10 years ago, before this was happening,
Yep.
15. And of course, you get photos too. So on a birding tour, it's weird because you're not even trying to get photos. You just want to see these birds. So you just stand there, and then in comes like white-bellied redstart or scimitar babblers or whatever. And it's obviously excellent for photographers. So
It's fantastic. We've got quite a few of these little spots sort of GPSed along, but sometimes you go along and then you'll see like a little new cutout. You can see where people have sort of cut back the vegetation and then very carefully place one of these logs, and you think, oh, this must be a new one. And you've got no idea what's going to come in. So
it's
you
very
a
exciting.
few mealworms. And yeah, yeah.
And the one weird aspect of this is that different species have an incredibly high fidelity to one little feeding station or one little log. I mean, like there's this ultramarine flycatcher that just comes in. There's just a stick just jammed into the ground next to the road, and you just put a couple mealworms there, and it'll just appear out of nowhere and sit on the stick, and you take its picture and eat some mealworms, and off it goes.
This bird has been coming. This same bird, I think, has been coming in for years into this same tree. It just sits in this pine tree, and then it kind of. I remember the story of. I think you might have been with them. With like there was maybe Ian and Keith, and I think the first time that you went up there, you saw this bird in a tree, and it was hopping around, kind of waiting for something, and none of you could figure out what it was. Where to feed this bird, and you look down and saw this thing and say, "Oh, that's it," and you put a mealworm on it, just flew straight down.
Exactly.
Anyway, so Felix and I saw this bird at the weekend.
Oh, excellent!
And exactly the same tree, exactly the same little log, and yeah.
To me, what's amazing about that to me is that ultramarine is like a long distance migrant, right? It comes down from the taiga or something, or it's migrating 1,000+ miles back to the same pine tree to sit on the same stick and eat mealworms from photographers all winter.
Yeah.
So it's a bizarre form of birding. Maybe some people don't like it. It's very different. I think to me, realizing that a lot of these birds are almost impossible to see if you're looking for them sort of in nature helps. And also thinking about the fact that, okay, imagine that I want to see Siberian ruby throat without using this setup. Just how much sort of harassing the bird I might have to do, calling and pishing or thrashing around in the grass, whereas you put out a couple mealworms and it just pops right in. You get amazing views. The level of disturbance seems pretty low to me. Now, I guess there is this argument that mealworms aren't the most nutritious thing for birds, and they become dependent on these food sources. And I don't know. I don't have a real strong position on that issue.
I mean, there's other things like the feeding of worms to the ant pitters and stuff like that. But these particular individuals that everybody sees, they're like I guess you could call them like an ambassador for their species. They're just sort of they're kind of taking one for the team and getting fat at the same time.
It is. It's kind of hard to imagine how it's really hurting them. I mean, it's that like that ultramarine flycatcher. It's a long distance migrant, so it manages to come back there every single year, get fat on mealworms, migrate north, probably breed successfully. I just don't see that as being a big problem. Maybe with resident birds, it's slightly different. I don't know, but that
it's a victimless crime.
it's a little bit like some of these birds that are consistently herded around by local guides in Madagascar so that people can see them, and sometimes people are very upset by this. But then if you also realize
sort of explain,
there's one pair of birds that's getting all this attention, and so they're like an ambassador, and they seem to breed successfully every single year because I've been there, for 10 plus years, and I've seen that as well. So it's hard to make the case that it's.
I think that's the thing. I think if people are using playback too much and it's affecting breeding success of certain birds, then obviously, you shouldn't be doing that. But just if what you're doing is not sort of distressing the birds and it's not stopping them breeding, I think it's maybe you can make a case for it being acceptable.
I also look at all the things we're doing in the world to disturb birds, large-scale pollution and bulldozing forests to build Walmarts. And if there's going to be a sort of scale of disturbance, putting some mealworms on a log, it has to rank fairly low on that scale.
Pretty low,
even
if it disturbs and if it's encouraging people to come that wouldn't have done it anyway, and that they've got that sort of economic benefit of coming in and employing guides and sort of contributing to protecting the habitat there. Anyway, so we had a wonderful time there. We got Felix a bunch of lifers. I'll put a few photos on, including the ultramarine flycatcher, which incidentally, at the end of a birding tour, we often have a bird of the trip competition. Everybody votes what was their favorite, but it regularly makes it to sort of like the top 5, and there's some pretty amazing birds. And I think it's obviously very beautiful. It's bright blue and white, but I think partially because you just see it so well. You're talking about like 6 feet away or less.
2 meters.
You often have to sort of back up a little bit to take a picture, because it's absolutely fearless, eye level, beautiful light. It's just amazing. Yeah.
So what was the story about the bunting? I saw your little triumphant video on YouTube.
So you had this whole thing with critically endangered species, and in Thailand, and probably in the world, there's probably about 200 of these, and these are the most threatened species in the whole world. I mean, they're on the edge of extinction. So seeing them and it is always a big deal. One of them in Thailand is the spoonbill sandpiper, which we talked about a few weeks ago. Another one is the helmeted hornbill, which also we discussed in our top lifetime birds. But another one of the critically endangered species in Thailand, or in Southeast Asia in winter, is the yellow-breasted bunting. Absolutely gorgeous bird in breeding plumage, bright yellow chest and belly, and it has like a black head in full breeding plumage, and the male's got a nice big white patch on the wing. And they breed up in sort of Siberia. They were also breeding in northern Japan before, sort of northern China, all the way across towards Europe. It had a huge range, and they were at one point a very, very numerous bird. And I think partially due to trapping, they were widely eaten in China. They trap them and eat them, and it's like a little sparrow, I don't know. It always seems pointless when I hear about people eating birds like that. The French eat some things like that, like ortolan buntings, and it just seems pointless. I mean, it's so sad.
I suppose if you have a very protein poor diet, just a tiny bit of protein and fat can be significant.
It might have been in the past,
but then they become just cultural things like hunting in the southern Mediterranean, where the people don't need those calories anymore. It's just something they do.
But this bird, compiled with sort of habitat destruction and stuff, a lot in the wintering grounds, because they love to come to roost in long grass. And this kind of natural, very long grass is, everything's sort of chopped down nice and short now. You've got rice fields everything's just chopped down and pesticides, whatever.
Dams as well.
The amount of places, the amount of places with these large amounts of long grass to roost in, that's where they roost, are sort of going down every year. And, they were always they've been a rare bird for quite a while, but it just seems to get rarer and rarer. And a few years ago, we found this. I think you might have seen this bird before me up in Taton. There's like a grassland area. There was a roosting site that people found, and I think you saw it. I went along and saw it the following year.
Yep.
And there's probably quite a few birds. What, like a couple of hundred maybe, or
I would have said a couple few dozen, but
right,
might
okay,
fluctuate.
Yeah. So what you do is you if you kind of know where they roost, you go to a place where you get a view of that long grass, and you wait. When I see them, they sort of fly in little flocks, and they sort of land in the grass, and then they kind of quickly drop down. They're quite hard to get a good view of.
Oh, definitely. If you're fast, you might have a brief view
just
perched up on top
or
of the
two,
grass, but then they kind of submerge very quickly. Pretty secretive.
Yeah. Anyway, so another thing about this, I'm a little bit competitive about my birding.
A little bit.
So a little bit, yeah. So my wife, she might not consider herself a birder now, but in her younger years, when she was a teenager, early 20s, she was actually quite a keen birder, and she did a bit of backpacking. She went to Nepal, and she went on a little walk, in this national park. And she had a travel diary, and she wrote down the birds that she saw on that walk. And then one day she pulls out, this is before I've seen the bird, one day she pulls out this travel diary and says, "Oh, Charlie, check this out. I put a list of birds that I saw on this walk in Nepal." And I looked through, and there was yellow-breasted bunting on this bloody travel diary. So I was
gripped.
I was seriously gripped, and one of the people I don't take well by being gripped off by is my wife. I was just desperate to see this bird after that. So finally, I think you put me onto this new site in northern Thailand, and I got them a few months later.
I didn't realize that was new. That was new for you. It was funny because when I sort of found that place, I'd just been in Myanmar and I'd just seen a bunch of yellow-breasted buntings. So it was just like, oh yeah,
right,
just a bunch more yellow-breasted buntings. I guess it's pretty.
But it turned out to be
scarce.
quite an important site, yeah. But it's changed now. There's a little spot further. I think they chopped the grass down there, and there's another little spot a bit further south. So anyway, Felix, being nuts about rarity and critically endangered species like his old man, he just kept saying, "Dad, I want to see yellow-breasted bunting. I want to see yellow-breasted bunting." And I was like, okay, let's try. So we went to this area, and we got there maybe an hour before sunset, and we were waiting. And then I'd see a few birds, quite distant, it's a few hundred meters, and you see these birds flying in, and he just wasn't getting on them, and he was getting more and more frustrated, and he just really got quite upset, and we had to just pack it up and just say okay, we're not going to see this bird. And just on the way out, this is just before sunset, I find this other patch of grass much closer to the road, and I said, let's just have a little scan. And I started scanning through, and it was much, much closer. And I actually saw a whole bunch of perched yellow-breasted bunting, and we got them in the scope. Really, really excellent views. They were just sat there in the late afternoon light, beautiful colors, and it was just such a high. He was just jumping up and down. He was absolutely delighted, having just been completely devastated that he hadn't seen them before. So that was very cool.
The highs and the lows.
Exactly, and then we did one of our little father-son birding videos for Instagram and Facebook. So yeah, if any of you follow us on there, then please check that out. It's quite fun.
No, it's good.
Yep.
I can read the excitement in your eyes. It's
it
sometimes
was great.
Those are the best kind of birding experiences when you sort of have the death of hope that you're going to see something, and then you see it at the last minute. It's funny the way the psychology works.
I tried to tell him that, but he usually gets angry at me when.
Well, I'll be looking forward to hearing some of these insights in your how to get kids into birding tutorial.
No, it's going to be great. Anyway, let's get on to our main topic of the episode. So today we're going to get back to our top 10 wildlife. That's our top 10 mammal sightings. And I believe we are at your number 6. I think that's right, isn't it?
Yep,
And
that's
your
right.
number 6 lifetime mammal, it's a big one, the humpback whale. So looking forward to hearing about this.
It's not small. It is probably the most common and most frequently seen whale in the world. So just a little background information. Although I'd spent almost my whole life in nature, traveling around, especially within the States and Mexico, sort of, let's say, Western Hemisphere, I just hadn't seen whales, which I don't know. I just hadn't spent time on boats, and I hadn't been in the right places at the right times to do whale watches. And I was starting to feel this weird deficiency, like I need to see some whales. And this really lasted up until 2009. I'd seen a couple distant humpback whales, but I'd never just really had a great whale experience. Now that summer, I believe that was the summer with the global recession and the economic crash. There was basically no guiding.
I thought that was the worst time for me as a guide before before COVID.
Before
hit.
COVID, yeah, and now it seems like
Yeah.
8 months without work. That's not so bad.
That wasn't too bad. Yeah.
So at that point I was living in South Africa, but I was working on this book about sea watching, which is sort of flight identification of water birds. And so along with my co-author Cameron Cox, I spent a lot of that summer just traveling all around the States, taking photos and just making observations for this book, this sort of groundbreaking field guide. And we were lucky enough that summer to hear about this incredible spectacle that was unfolding on Cape Cod, sort of the easternmost cape in Massachusetts, northeastern United States. There was just a spectacle of just probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands of shearwaters just
Wow.
in a feeding frenzy. And then associated with this phenomenon was humpback whales, like probably dozens of humpback whales at the very least, along with jaegers and all sorts of other oceanic birds and seals. I've still never heard an explanation of what was going on. I'm sure there is one. So if somebody's listening and knows what was going on there, I'm sure it was some kind of superabundance of nutrients, But it was just
Was this close to the coast or further out at sea?
It was visible from the beach. So you just drive up to the beach and you look. You don't even need a scope, and you're just seeing thousands of shearwaters streaming by.
Kidding.
We had long-tailed jaegers flying down the beach multiple times, and then
Wow.
whales. You were just looking right off the beach, 200-300 yards, and there's breaching humpback whales. It was absolutely incredible, and there was this weird flow to the huge, massive shearwaters. Like you'd come to Race Point one day and they'd all be flowing south, or maybe just 1 hour, and then 2 hours later they'd all be flowing north, and then so there was just this weird like circulation of shearwaters, and so they were running these little whale watching trips out of Provincetown, which is the town right at the tip of Cape Cod, the sort of northern tip, and so we took a couple of these whale watching tours. So they were pretty close from the beach, but this is really the way to get incredibly close to humpback whales, and sort of $30 or something, and it has to be like the best value $30 pelagic trip in the history of the world, because you're going out there and you're seeing like dozens of whales, you're seeing thousands of shearwaters, you're seeing jaegers, but the whales were really, as much as I like seabirds and I was working on the seabird book, the whales stole the show. Most people probably know this, but a lot of whale sightings are exciting, but you're just getting glimpses of a very large creature under the water. You get a big blow, you get a fin, and then if you're lucky, you might get the tail fins. The great thing about humpbacks is that they are really active whales, and this summer, maybe just because they had so much to eat, they were just unbelievably exuberant. I mean, these whales were just breaching and flopping around and flapping their tail fins, and I mean, it was just unbelievable. And then they're surrounded by tens of thousands of shearwaters, and it was just so. Up to that point in my life, I'd felt this whale deficiency, and this just completely filled. Like
it was quickly filled.
Absolutely, just overwhelmed by whales. There was also fin whales that we saw on some of these trips, and we saw one
Fin
northern,
whale, really?
yeah, which is I guess it's the second biggest in the world after blue whale.
Uh-huh.
And we saw one northern right whale, which was really weird.
Ooh,
But
that is
sadly,
an incredibly rare animal, eh?
I think it's a couple hundred left in the world. And tragically, the one
Yeah.
that we saw had like a buoy stuck on its tail, and it was dragging around this buoy,
Oh
which is
no,
probably
really?
why it wasn't able to migrate. So it was very nice to see, but under those circumstances, it wasn't great. But
Sheesh.
I remember the skipper like reported the whale to the Coast Guard, and we were hoping they might somehow be able to help this whale. Probably didn't happen, but yeah, it was quite the spectacle. And needless to say, we took thousands of photos of shearwaters for the book. So if you actually look at my sea watching book, you'll see a bunch of different photos taken that summer of 2009 on Cape Cod.
Wow, sounds amazing. I've seen humpbacks many, many times from the coast, but I don't think I've ever been out and seen them very close. I know. I always felt that I've been really unlucky seeing whales breach. And so many times I've had people saying, "Oh, I just saw a whale breach," and of course, I was looking in completely the opposite direction. um, and just once, I think it was on a tour with you in Namibia, we were looking out to sea, and I was just scanning the coast like that, and just in the spot where I had my binoculars, I had this humpback whale just completely breached in my field of view, and I think no one else saw it because they weren't looking at that particular time. But I was very happy with that.
It's an impressive thing to see a humpback whale breach. You know, a dolphin, which weighs what, a couple hundred pounds, is impressive. But when you see something that weighs like tons, just shooting its entire body out of the water, it's just incredible. Just the force unleashed.
Just before the show, I was just chatting with my wife, and I was saying that today we were going to chat about humpback whales, and she told me her humpback whale story. Can I quickly tell you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, do you know about the sardine run in South Africa?
Yep. Like on the West Coast, right?
So, no, because you know on the West Coast you got all this cold water, and then on the East Coast it's all warm. So the West Coast is much more productive for fish and sea life in general. In some seasons you get this sort of little this cold water starts to sort of penetrate the Indian Ocean. You get this cold stream that pushes in, and all these sardines, like millions of sardines, just follow this cold water stream along the southern coast and sort of up towards like KwaZulu-Natal and the more sort of tropical Indian Ocean. And there's absolute feeding frenzies go on at these at certain times, just once a year. I think it's maybe May or something like that. So all the scuba divers, they go down. And they go in, and there's like sharks just having feeding frenzies, and there's whales, and there's gannets shooting down from below. There can be penguins, there can be everything. You know, it's surprising that people don't sort of get killed on these things. It's just absolutely nuts. But she was saying that she came eye to eye with a humpback whale in the water.
Wow.
And
She was diving.
She was diving, yeah. And I said, "How close were you?" And she said, "This." And she just put her arms width. And I said, "What you mean, like a meter?" And she said, "Yeah." It was like she was a
Wow.
meter away from a humpback whale's eye. And she said it breached over there. And she pointed in the corner of our living room. And I was like, you know, it's not a very big living room, you know. And it said it breached just like, you know, I don't know, like 10 meters or less from her as well. She said it was just absolutely incredible. So that really sort of put my whale experiences into perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. There would be this incredible mixture of awe and fear and excitement because of just being that close to an animal that big.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll save this for a future episode, but one of my top lifetime natural history experiences was snorkeling with whale sharks, which are big but a lot smaller than a humpback whale. And wow,
Yeah.
just being in the water close to these kind of animals is amazing. It really kind of puts you in your place. You're like flopping around with your pathetic flippers, and then this thing that weighs, 1,000+ pounds is just powering its way through the ocean.
I think probably my favorite whale watching though has probably been looking at blue whales in Sri Lanka. I think you've done that as well at that trip.
A couple times. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
They don't do nearly as much as humpbacks.
No.
But just seeing their size is awe-inspiring.
You do see, they sort of, you'll see the sort of I don't think you normally see the head, but you'll get the middle of the back, and then you'll get the sort of dorsal fin, and then further back, and then finally the tail. But it just goes on forever,
I know.
just like that. You think
Yeah.
that animal can't be
Like,
that long? It's like
that's
the
got to
size
be
of
a different
building.
one. That can't be the
Yeah,
same whale. It's just,
exactly.
yep. Like, it's still going,
Nuts.
still going.
Yeah.
No. I think it's
Yeah.
done now. Oh wait, no. There's a little dorsal fin.
Yeah, one of our colleagues at Tropical Birding, a guy called Lyle Gwynn, he's very, very into sea mammals. I'm sure he's got lots of great stories to tell. Maybe we'll have to get him on the show at a point.
Definitely. He's seen almost all of the world's.
I think almost all the cetaceans. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a truly impressive accomplishment. There are so many whales that are hard to see. You just got to spend a lot of time on the water.
Makes me feel seasick just thinking about it.
Yep.
Oof. Very cool. No, that sounds awesome. That sounds quite the experience there. Yep. So anyway, should we move on to your next mammal?
Yep.
Okay, and your number 5 mammal, I've got written down gorilla here, and then in brackets chimpanzee. So I think that's it's a bit cheeky, sort of sneaking that in there. But
hey, you definitely did that on one of the rounds of your mammals.
yeah,
I don't remember what you snuck in
guilty.
there, but yeah.
I think I did it a few times. Yeah. Anyway, cool. But tell us about mainly gorilla and also a little bit about chimpanzee.
Well, I should probably also note that you sort of stole my number 6, because I think my number 6 is your number 1. So we had a long and complicated negotiation, and in the end, we agreed that
did.
I would mention it when you mentioned it as your number 1. So, yeah, gorilla.
Yeah.
This again, I would count seeing gorillas in the wild probably in the top 5 natural history experiences I've had in my life. It's very different than a lot of other kind of mammal viewing things. And the way I always describe it is that when you're watching gorillas, the gorillas are also watching you, and they seem to be just as perceptive and intelligent in their own way. And so it's a remarkable wildlife experience in that it's like it's bilateral, or it's a two-way thing. You know, when you're watching a yellow-breasted bunting on top of some grass, it's beautiful and it's wild and it's like immaculate, but you don't have the same sense of like, this bunting is fully aware of me and is thinking about who I am. And a lot of wildlife experiences are that way. Now, I do think a lot of animals are probably far more intelligent than we realize and far more aware of our presence. But with gorillas, it's really another level. You just feel like...
Yeah.
Another way I describe it is visiting the family. You know, it really does feel like, we are very close to these animals. They're almost human. So this is something I have been incredibly fortunate to do. I think I've done it 4 times or maybe 3 times now, gorilla tracking in both Rwanda and Uganda. And it's something I've been able to do because I was guiding tours for tropical birding. It was something that I probably never could have afforded to do, or never would have afforded on my own, because it costs, I think the current price is like $600 for a permit.
I think it might have gone up, eh? I think it's gone up to $1,000 just for the permission to go
Rwanda.
up. Yeah, the permit.
I know it's been up and down a little bit. So Rwanda took it up, and Uganda kept it lower, and then Rwanda dropped it. So I don't know, but yeah, it's been up to 1,000. It's a very expensive thing to do, which I think with these animals is probably a good model, because you don't want mass market tourism, tens of thousands of people exposing them to human pathogens, many of which will pass to the gorillas. You want to keep it small and controlled and sort of, but then bring money back to the communities from that. So I think it's been run pretty remarkably well, especially in Rwanda, this gorilla tracking program. First time I did it was actually, there was an EDUC tour that was offered by the Rwandan government, and that I got to join and got to track gorillas as part of that.
Wow.
So that was probably the most special gorilla encounter. Was the first time, had no idea what to expect. And you trek up the side of a volcano in northwestern Rwanda, Volcanoes National Park. And usually when you see them, you're walking through like thick bamboo. They often are in bamboo. And there's a whole team of national park people who are sort of telling you what to do. But you don't know, are they going to be kind of running away, or, are they going to be like, what's the encounter going to be like? But they're just unbelievably tame and gentle. And there's a rule about how far you're supposed to stay from them, which, if I recall, it's 4 meters or something, 5 meters.
Right.
But it's always the gorillas that actually violate this rule and just walk right up to you. You know,
Right.
I've had babies walk almost over my feet, and yeah, it's almost like you're joining the troop for an hour. Your time is restricted to about an hour with the gorillas. You're looking in their eyes. You're watching their gentle routine, the social interactions. One of my favorite things was seeing a huge male silverback, just unbelievably powerful. What do they weigh? Like 400, 500 pounds. A big silverback male.
Yeah.
One of the strongest animals, land animals in the world. I think they're about 10 times stronger than a human, even proportionate to their weight.
Really?
So like this guy could probably bench press like 4,000 pounds. But he had these two little babies just like rolling around on his belly and then like poking him in the eye, and he's just kind of swatting them away, but then he'll grab them and hug them, and it's just amazing seeing these kind of interactions. One of my favorite things about gorillas is looking at their hands and feet, because their hands and feet are just almost exactly like human hands and feet. I mean, they have fingerprints, and they have like little cracks in their skin and abrasions and fingernails, and it's just, every time I look at the hands or feet, I almost get like lost in the sense of like how close they are to people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to describe, but every time I've done it, it has just been this awe-inspiring experience. Have you done it yet, Charlie?
No, I haven't. I see it as an exercise in patience. I will go. It's in my bucket list destination. It's probably in my top 5 bucket list destinations.
Well, I'll
I'm
tell you,
pretty desperate to do it, but
we're both pretty economical, shall we say?
yeah.
But if you do have a chance and you're on a family trip, I wouldn't regret dropping the money to see these animals. I think it would be money well spent.
I know there's a couple of stories I know of these. We have one. He might have been on a tour with you actually, but he told me that he was moved by a silverback male. The silverback male came and very gently took him by the arm and just moved him like a meter further back and said, "No, this is where you sit." Can you imagine? That was. I'm sure he won't mind me saying his name. This is Howard.
Okay.
Yeah, he said he was moved by this silverback, which is pretty amazing.
This wasn't like an emotional experience. This is actually a physical.
I think it was probably both. Yeah. Another gorilla story that I remember. There was a zoo. It might have been Jersey Zoo or somewhere like that. But there was a zoo somewhere, and a little kid. There was like a little pit with these big gorillas in. Like a family of gorillas, and a little kid fell down into this pit with all these gorillas. This is years ago. It's probably like 20 years ago. A little child. And it was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and I think the child maybe was knocked unconscious or something like that, and was just lying there on the ground, and all the other gorillas were sort of coming around and starting to prod the thing, and the big silverback male came and he stood guard over this child to stop all the younger gorillas coming in, and he said, no, I'm going to protect this human child. Can you imagine?
Amazing.
Just it was a very famous encounter. When I was in Cameroon years ago, we went to the zoo and we had a sort of behind the scenes tour, and I actually got to hold a baby gorilla, and it was an incredible. I'm not one for sort of petting zoos and stuff like that, but it still blew me away. And just looking at this thing in the eye and just seeing the intelligence, it's really quite something, when they just look at you, they're feel like they're looking right in the back of your soul.
Well, that's a good transition to my chimp corollary. So,
yeah,
chimps didn't make my top 10 list. They didn't quite make it. They almost did. Chimps are also amazing animals. The first time, the same trip I did in Rwanda, I also got to see chimps quite a few times. Tracked them, and then also just stumbled into them in the forest a few times. I know I was camping up at this place called the Nyungwe National Park, and I just go for a walk from my camp and see chimps.
No way.
One day I saw a chimp fall out of a tree. This was like a 40 meter tall rainforest tree, and he fell probably 20 or 30 meters. And I just remember him screaming, his arms flailing, and then he managed to catch himself on some vegetation and climb back up. But so I had a bunch of encounters with chimps, and this was immediately after having seen gorillas for the first time. And the difference is so striking.
Yeah.
A lot of this is going to sound very anthropomorphic, which I suppose it is, but just gorillas seem so calm and kind of noble and just unconcerned, and they're sitting on the ground. You know, they're the only one of the only primates, forest primates, that is just on the ground most of the time because they're so big and powerful. The silverbacks, that they have almost no predators, but chimps, although they're strong and imposing, they have a lot of predators, and they're like super nervous and aggressive, and they sort of scream at each other. And the most impressive encounter I had with chimps was actually in this little forest scrap that was shared by a troop of baboons and at least one troop of chimps. And these two like primate tribes were basically having a screaming, shouting war one day. And it was like skirmish lines, or on one side were the chimps, on the other side were the baboons, and they were, you know, 10 meters apart.
You wouldn't want to have to referee that match, would you?
Oh my goodness! I mean,
can you imagine?
I always tell people that baboon is the animal that I'm most afraid of in Africa by far. Yeah. That's another story, but they were just literally screaming each other down. It was like, it actually reminded me a little bit of the descriptions of tribal warfare in New Guinea, of like skirmish lines and waving spears and like shouting insults wow, it was, awe-inspiring but also kind of terrifying. And after having seen these two great apes, I thought to myself, like, humans are a lot more like chimps than we are like gorillas.
Oh, really?
Absolutely.
I guess we probably like to think of ourselves as being more like gorillas.
Yeah.
But in actual fact,
it's like one of those memes. What we think we are, and what we actually are. But to me, it's a fascinating puzzle, because I think that there's parts of both in our nature, and if you just look at the shared DNA, we're sharing 99.5 or 6 or 7, whatever, with both of those animals. So we're not really far from either.
I think even in some, chimpanzees in different populations act in quite different ways. I think some, the cannibalism and, a lot more sort of
predation and
behavior, and other places with their little tool use, and getting little sticks and going into termite mounds and things like that. So there's a whole bunch of different,
there's diversity of
contrasting
cultures
behaviors.
Right. Yeah, and I wonder, this troop of chimps that I saw in this little scrap of forest, they might have also been quite stressed by this highly degraded and shrunk environment as well. So, apparently bonobos are much more gentle and very different from chimps. Promiscuous and, missionary position.
Pansexual, yeah.
But whatever else you can say about them, seeing great apes is just incredibly fascinating, and it kind of stirs your soul in some weird, deep way that you can't really transmit that experience. It's just something I would say everybody needs to experience it for themselves.
And just the fact that they're hunted, it just almost feels like it's, you're killing other humans. Why people would choose to hunt them or kill them or, poach them for body parts or whatever. It's just beyond me. It's really sad. I've actually heard chimps, and I haven't even seen them. I went in my days in Cameroon. I was camping for 2 months on top of this mountain, and there was chimps there, but they were very heavily hunted, so they just would come nowhere near people. And I heard them screaming in the forest, but I never got close to them, unfortunately.
Their voices are really something. And actually, this reminds me, what we'll play for the natural sound to close out this episode is a recording of chimps that I made in Rwanda back during my first visit 10 plus years ago. Another weird chimp encounter I had. So I described this, very aggressive sort of battle lines against the baboons. But at another time, I tracked chimps in Uganda. and it was unusually dry. There was no fruit in the forest, and we found chimps, but they were all depressed. Like they were just like moping in the trees, and their eyes were kind of like flat and sunken. And then we found one male who was just walking on the forest floor bipedally. He was just walking along.
Really?
He would sort of, he'd go four legs, and he'd stand up and look and walk a little, and then go down to four legs. But he was like this lost soul, like walking through the forest, and it seemed like he was looking for food. But even he had this like
Right.
depressed air to him. So
Oh,
I guess that's part of what's so weird about these monkeys, is that they're so similar to us that we can sort of attribute our own emotions to them, or in some sense
yeah.
like empathize with them. Where again,
Uh-huh.
you don't really empathize with the yellow-breasted bunting. It's there's a divide between you and most birds are that way. We look at them and they're just wild, and they're just totally different, and they're off in their own world.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and I tell you, I would absolutely never pass up the chance to look at great apes. And actually monkeys in general are pretty interesting, but great apes, just
I've got a friend that went to see them. I think she might have paid $1,000 to go out and see them. And she had the most amazing day, and it was just incredible. And then the next day they said there'd been a cancellation. There was a spot, so she went and sunk another grand to go up the next day again, without hesitation. So it says a lot about what a special experience it must be. Very cool, great stories. Really has got me thinking about wanting to go and see gorillas now. But it'll happen one day.
It'll happen.
Yep. Any last comments?
I think that you and I are going to be at home for at least the next few weeks.
Yeah.
And so I guess unless
Should get a few.
we charge out and do something interesting, well, next week will be your, what is it, 6 and 5 lifetime mammals?
No.
Oh no,
No,
4
I'm
4
on
and 3.
sort of, 3 and 2, I think now.
Ooh,
Yeah, we're getting towards the end of this epic journey.
rarefied territory. Can't wait.
It's gonna. We're also thinking about maybe getting some guests on the show, so we're gonna let you know more next week.
Yeah, there's endless good folks to interview, so yeah,
Yeah.
we'll be featuring that next month or so. Yep, natural sound is chimps from Nyungwe National Park in Rwanda, and guess we'll catch people in about a week.
Okay, see you next week.